discussion of the FEMA floodplain mapping changes within the town of Webster, and I think our community director, community development director, Joshua Tuzo, is going to present this. So go ahead, Joshua.
Thank you, Supervisor Flaherty. So yeah, the topic of tonight's presentation is to brief the board on some upcoming changes with the National Flood Insurance Program, which is also commonly referred to as the NFIP. So just a little bit of history and background. The National Flood Insurance Program was originally created back in 1968, and there were two fundamental purposes for the program. Number one being to reduce future flood damage, and number two being to protect waterfront property owners. So the program issues official flood insurance rate maps, which are referred to as firms, and these maps identify areas that are prone to flooding. So the program essentially governs development and construction activities in these areas that are subject to flooding. And it is a federal program, however, each local municipality that has waterfront or creeks and streams, they are responsible for administering the national program. So the town of Webster does currently have a flood damage prevention ordinance. It's chapter 170 of our town code. It references the official firms, the maps that identify the flood-prone areas, and it also establishes a permit application and a review process for projects that are proposed within these flood-prone areas. So the code does require that there is a local floodplain administrator who is responsible for issuing the permits, evaluating the requests, and of course maintaining records to ensure that we're complying with the national program. So the official flood insurance rate maps, the current ones that we work off of were last updated in August of 2008. And a recent flood insurance study was performed for lakeshore communities within Monroe County, and actually others along the Lake Ontario shoreline. So with that, there were recent flooding events in 2017 and 2019. We see that the climate continues to evolve. We do have more intense storm events, it seems. So they thought it would be a good idea to revisit the official mapping for our area. And as you can recall, with the READY grants and the program that the state had, many property owners were able to get grant funds to fill their properties or repair their break walls. So given the change in the Lake Ontario outflow regulation plan and all of the work that's been commenced since those two flooding events, the maps for our area have been updated to reflect more recent topography. So basically, once the study was complete, they did provide us with the revised maps, I believe back in February of this year. And the new maps are set to become effective on July 31st of 2024. So a summary of the changes that are taking place when the new maps will take effect. They've added a new category that's called the VE zone, and it basically factors in wind and wave action along the Lake Ontario shoreline. Previously, that was never factored into any of the hydrology modeling, but with storms, it does tend to have an impact on the water elevation. So they've taken that into account. What they've also done is there is a process for homeowners and property owners that if they believe that they've been mapped within a floodplain area correct. You know, they've never witnessed actual flooding on their property. There is a formal process that they can go through to apply for an official map revision or an amendment. And we have had quite a few of those in various portions of town. So 20 of those were determined to be removed from the floodplain as these property owners went through that process. So what these new revised maps do is they also reflect the properties that have been removed from the floodplain since the last maps were adopted. Now they've changed the numbering and the panel index numbers on some of the map panels for our community. And then there's also been some additional federal and state program changes since we adopted our local ordinance back in 2008. So the long and short of it is, we've already, after tonight's presentation, we've completed the first 2 action items. We did review the preliminary draft maps back in February. I believe, if I remember correctly, actually about 90 properties are being removed from the floodplain, and I don't believe there's any additional new properties that are being added, even with these new categories and new mapping. So we have to brief the local governing body of these program changes, which is the purpose of tonight's presentation. And then we have to compose a draft ordinance or amend our existing and provide that to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation for their review. Once they've given us the okay, we can then schedule and hold a public hearing on the new ordinance. And we are required to have the new ordinance in place by July 1st, which is effectively 30 days before that July 31st effective date. So what I'm proposing that we do is to set a public hearing, have a resolution on the next town board meeting of May 16th to set the public hearing, and that would take place, I believe, on June 8th. Is that the first? That would be the first town board meeting in June. And then depending on the feedback we get from the community, we have some time to tweak the proposed ordinance, and then I would propose bringing it back to the second meeting in June for formal adoption so that we have it in place prior to the deadline. So with that, I will turn it over to the board and be happy to address any questions that you may have.
I have a question about the 90 properties to be removed. Do the property owners know, or is there a process to communicate that they are being removed?
Yes, I believe that there is a process. I'm not exactly sure that it's the town's responsibility to notify them that they're being removed, but anyone that's currently in these areas is required to carry flood insurance. So if they're being removed, I believe they're going to be notified that they're going to no longer be required to have flood insurance. But I will confirm.
Who would notify them then?
It could potentially be FEMA.
Okay.
They are the overseers of the program, although we are, as the local municipality, responsible for administering the program.
Right. And it looks like the meeting is June 6th, the Thursday.
Okay.
Right one, June 6th, and it would be June 20th.
Does that sound like a reasonable time frame, Charlie? To you?
Yes. Yeah. You and I have discussed this already in terms of timing. And what Josh and I are suggesting is that we repeal the entire Chapter 170 that's in existence and replace it with a new one, which Josh, well, mostly Josh and I will draw.
Yes, and they have provided us with a model ordinance with a lot of the up-to-date language to include. We just have to customize it to our community. be too much of a heavy lift.
Josh, will the, excuse me, will the public have a chance to view these maps in advance of the public hearing?
So actually, when they were provided as preliminary maps back in February, we did promote them. At that time, we made them publicly available for folks to view them, and we can certainly, continue to make them available. I will say, we are in receipt of the hard copy maps that they sent us. So if anyone has any questions, if there's any residents that are curious to know if they're in or out or they're not sure, we have the official maps on file in our office at Town Hall, and anyone can also come in and take a look at them. We're also working on a public-facing GIS system that would be accessible. A lot of the tools that we use internally will become accessible to the public, and this would be one of those layers that you would be able to type in your property address, turn on a layer, and see how it relates to your property.
Great, thank you. And should we have a resident come to the public hearing and dispute the fact that their property is in the flood zone, just in case that happens? They already know that it is because they're paying additional insurance for being in a flood zone,
Yes.
but they're not happy with their designation. It's not the town board that takes up that refute, is it?
No.
So that wouldn't necessarily hold up the process of when we need to adopt this ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
I will mention that if we are unable to or unwilling to adopt the ordinance by the deadline given to us, it does put the town at risk for anyone living within the town of Webster to obtain flood insurance. So we would lose our ability for those folks to even get flood insurance.
Yeah, certainly that was not my intention. I just wanted to make the public clear on where they could take their complaint and how to get a resolution of that it wouldn't be with this board.
Yes, that is correct. And I think we are one of the lucky communities in that we are actually removing those from the floodplain and not adding a whole bunch. So
But we're adding some.
I believe there isn't one new property being added.
Okay, good.
So if it was flipped around, I could understand.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't anticipate there being very much pushback.
That was good news.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Anything else? As usual, Josh, great presentation, thank you.
Absolutely.
And we'll work with Charlie and Ken and Dolly on the resolutions for setting